So now we've got the fourth in this session this morning. So I'd like to be able to introduce Agustina Andreoletti. I'm sorry.
No, it's
been
fine.
a long morning. Agustina is an Argentinian culture worker, but based in Cologne, and has a PhD project underway, which is to look at alternative biennale models. And she also is very active in that she runs a project space as well in Cologne. So welcome, thank you very much.
So in this paper, I will conceptualize distributed models of archival and circulation of digitalized and digital native materials. Although my research draws from non-institutional projects, it's my interest to understand how art institutions host, shelter, and circulate knowledge born in the shadows, and how cultural workers use and abuse the institutions. This presentation is structured around the concepts of opacity and legitimation, using art and art institutions to make that possible. I will give an overview on how the work from the shadows leaks back into institutional structures, and it is sometimes even validated by them. Being in the shadows implies specific kinds of invisibility, which allows things to happen that might not be possible in plain view. Shadow libraries intersect between the commons and the underground to jointly qualify a subversive, troublemaking type of resistance and a collective organization beyond professionalized education and the privatization of knowledge. All the projects presented here take different approaches to visibility and the potential risk coming from the practice. Many shadow libraries have been working in partial view and use art practices and institutions to create particular types of protection of their work. As a form of complicity, art and education agents offer legitimation to a practice that is established in the limits of legality. For this reason, being concerned with how, why, and where media is made accessible is essential to their interpretation. Books, magazines, articles, photographs, and audiovisual material require the engagement of people to support their circulation. The core of my research is to understand the responsibilities assumed by shadow practitioners in constituting their cultural history, protecting and sharing all the knowledge that they think it's worth defending, and the impact this practice has on ecology of institutions. Stefan Horn and Fred Moten, in their book about the undercommons, explain that their purpose consists of not being against the institution, to disarticulate the for or against logic of institutional critique. They propose a double agent model, engaging both the institution and crime. Quote, "The only possible relation to the university today is a criminal one, to abuse its hospitality, to spite its mission, to join its refugee colony," end of quote. Using the university as an example for other institutions of governance, the authors explain that in the underground, it is where the work is done, subverted and obscured. When the commons are not always accessible, the undercommons present modes to be involved in common amateur practices. In this way, amateurism offers the openness to be affected by others, without the limits imposed by institutions, markets, or states. Being outside governance makes the model opaque. A growing number of shadow librarians, challenging the library expert authority, have come to support co-authorship, expanding the responsibility for the process of deciding what is missing and needs to be included, and how this knowledge is categorized and shared. The criminality of the undercommons is opposed to professionalization. Under situations of increasing precarization, amateur librarians organize themselves from within those conditions, allowing subjectivity and personal drive. The impulse to steal from the library, from an author, from a professional, is done with neither apologies nor malice. The practice is not naive either, but as the urgency to share originates, it becomes imperative not only to counter the influence of hegemonic discourse, but also to occupy a space as a collective. Libraries emerged to democratize the access to books, offering media under terms publishers and sellers cannot or will not do it. One of the library's purposes is to balance this book business. Still, in many cases, the challenge of providing affordable access to materials is left to students, faculty, artists, and curious people to figure out for themselves. Despite adverse conditions, people get the materials they need through informal networks that emerge in many contexts to distribute materials, from external hard drives, shared person to person, and private folders in Google Drive, to online data lockers such as ARG, or peer-to-peer distributed repositories such as Memory of the World Public Library. On account of digital copies, the publication is no longer a limited supply. That will mean like sharing media is not about dividing media, but multiplying it. With only a few resources, everyone could be in the position to provide low-cost access to knowledge. While shadow libraries are under the line of legality and their content is far from being universal, their users create collections without bureaucratic and economic limitations. Amateur shadow librarians store, organize, and circulate digital media for themselves and their colleagues. A library collects, indexes, and presents information while taking into account archival, economic, and knowledge construction perspectives. A shadow library works in the same way, but its purpose is unofficial. The infrastructure and content of shadow libraries are thought, built, and operated by private initiatives, small groups of people, and individuals who often remain anonymous due to the unauthorized character of the practice. They assume the distributed task of organizing pieces of knowledge, preserving and enlarging collections according to their needs, regardless of their legality. Shadow libraries engage without destroying the institutions in the name of progress and revolution. They offer greater accessibility of what is inside the institution, bringing it more organically outside within the public sphere. I will note that many of these amateur librarians work in institutions. They even run institutions themselves. And checking the material, you could see like stamps in all the books, where the books come from. They're from the library. They were scanned in official libraries from institutions and official archives. So ARG was born as arg.org more than 10 years ago by the artist Sean Dockery and some of his friends as a way to share and exchange ideas, comparable to a local book club or literature discussion group. In ARG, people share publications, thoughts, and observations. Over time, the focus of the project shifted from a small group of members sharing ideas about a few books to thousands of people uploading and downloading material from its server without charge. The users of the site tend to be writers, artists, activists, designers, philosophers, and members of academia. Since the beginning, ARG supports self-organized reading groups and spawned a second project called the Public School, which supports autodidactic activities intended to create possible alternative futures for art education. Dockery defines ARG as a generative scaffolding between institutions. Quote, "The image of scaffolding was simply a way of describing an orientation with respect to institutions that was neither inside nor outside, dependent nor independent, reformist or oppositional. At the time, the institutions I meant were specifically universities, which seemed to have absorbed theory into closed seminar rooms, academic formalities, and rarefied publishing worlds." End of quote. Circulating digitalized copies outside the paths governed by local distribution, price, and contracts, ARG became a meeting space for people who wanted to share knowledge. Users asked each other for digital copies of particular text, and when those files are uploaded, they stay available on the site for other users. But the risk of this practice is not small. Many shadow libraries try to distribute the material, making use of selective visibility. Being small and out of reach is a strategy that most shadow libraries use for their protection. Other projects, such as ARG, when they become visible, have an approach more similar to loopholing. Many copyright laws have exceptions of fair use regulations. They vary according to national legislations and allow for the use of copyrighted works under specific provisions without permission. At public appearances and presentations, Dockery emphasizes the educational character of the project and its non-commercial orientation. Such characterization is intended to shift attention from the notion of piracy and toward questions of public interest and the common good. Another masking tool used around the platform is to frame art as an artistic project. Artworks and art institutions allow certain kind of legibility and visibility. Meanwhile, the enforcement of copyright laws within the arts has other legislations regarding quotation, citation, and remix, and in case of prosecution, the process will take longer and might allow possible exceptions. However, some publishing houses did object to the site. In 2009, the publisher Books asked ARC to remove all its publications, but the consequences were not long-lasting. People re-uploaded the books, as many of the users download the content of the platform regularly to back up the site. In 2010, ARC was taken down by the publisher Macmillan over specific texts, including Beyond Capital, but the amateur librarians are resilient. They uploaded the whole library under a similar name a few weeks later. This is the reason why ARC name has changed over time, usually adding A's, as the site had to keep moving to protect its identity. The platform moves in the way in which digital data moves, being copied between directories and changing its name and location. The second project in this presentation is Memory of the World Public Library, initiated by Tomislav Medak and Marcel Mars in Zagreb. It empowers people to digitize, collect, share, and preserve publications that were unaffordable, unavailable, or undesirable. The online platform and its articulation in the form of artwork and art exhibitions provide sites of resistance. Sorry, I had to change the picture. To traditional notions of value and use libraries' conventions as mechanisms of rebellion, resilience, and play. Calling the project Public Library intentionally establishes it concerning traditional methods of archival and expertise. The collection of Memory of the World Public Library is created mostly by individuals and communities who decided to digitize books by themselves for their personal use. While each person is only available to scan and index a few publications, the small contributions increase the collection. Memory of the World Public Library survives on the volunteer work of individuals. The value of the peer-generated collection contrasts with the investment that will be required to create an equivalent archive within an institution. By organizing a repository with others, this project encourages to think about the library as a free space that presents unrestricted access to knowledge, participating in a more significant action to oppose the commodification of education and the introduction of artificial scarcity. The political aspects of the project and the efforts to form and publicize the movement were expressed more explicitly as part of a group exhibition at Museo Nacional Centro de Arte Reina Sofía in Madrid in 2014 and in 2015 at Gallery Nova in Zagreb, both created by the Croatian collective BHV. Memory of the World Public Library uses art as the foundation to release publications from copyright restrictions while raising legitimation from the art world as cultural capital. The project tests the autonomy of art, presenting it as a, quote, field of unlimited freedom, end of quote. In case of possible lawsuits against Medak, Mars, BHV, the gallery or the museum, the claims of autonomy create a partial shielding cover of untouchability, as all art parties become complicit in the operation. Institutions embracing and co-opting critique provide in this case an advantage. The library uses the public status of the art institution to communicate free access and circulation of knowledge as common sense. In contrast, the institution brings knowledge to the public and supports creativity. The cooperation with institutions intensifies the influence the shadow library could have in the public sphere, lowering the risks of jeopardizing the project. The same methods used to grant market regulations could also be applied to exert political government, making copyright a tool for political censorship and surveillance. With the new vulnerabilities of the online, the return to offline digital distributions has gained momentum. Although restoring an early form of exchange, contemporary devices provide faster circulation of larger quantities of data in less time. Methods for offline sharing are often used for artistic projects, like the work by Adam Bartol, where he installed USB mass storage devices in public spaces, or the project by Sam Hopkins and John Kamicha, The Bike Gang, which consists of a series of moving image documents co-produced with bike enthusiasts in Nairobi. The films are archived on mobile phones and shared offline via Bluetooth, as it's the only way to make the audiovisual material accessible to the members of the local community. Although these propositions are quite relevant for the circulation of shadow libraries in general, when found in countries from the global south, these practices become more than creative gestures. Cuba has one of the highest standards of literacy in the world, but at the same time, one of the lowest rates of internet access. Most Cubans reach the internet through public Wi-Fi parks, which are expensive, inconsistent, and inconvenient. The bandwidth is restricted, and some content may be unavailable. As a result, Cubans have developed an offline system for distributing digital content called El Paquete Semanal, so the weekly package. El Paquete is a digital library distributed unofficially through USB sticks and portable hard drives since approximately 2008. The diverse collection includes movies and TV shows, music, video games, apps, digitalized magazines and books, and complete copies of websites, including Wikipedia. The distribution of El Paquete has been allowed by a way of lack of government disruption. The Cuban state tolerates El Paquete as long as the distributors continue to self-censor overtly political content. While Cuban communication is still profoundly shaped by the state and its official media, El Paquete reveals how a decentralized network is virtually impossible to control. Almost everyone in Cuba has a source for receiving El Paquete, whether it's a store, a neighborhood, a distributor they pay, or a friend who gives them a copy for free. Once data is purchased from a distributor, it can be shared with others through hand-to-hand transmission on USB storage or over Bluetooth. The content that makes El Paquete is downloaded at university computers, government workplaces, or luxury hotels, brought into the country on physical hard drives by friends or relatives from abroad, or captured from illegal satellite dishes. Beyond foreign material, there is a significant amount of content produced specifically for El Paquete. Some includes the independent art magazine Vistar, devoted to Cuban culture, and Sección Arte, a collection of Cuban art sources and works specifically created or digitalized for the medium. A single week of Sección Arte might contain ebooks and PDFs, audio lectures, video clips, images, and saved HTML documents, taking full advantage of the digital affordances of the distribution system. Each collection travels Cuba through a network of hard drives moved via car, plane, train, and bus. Several mid-level distributors may modify the content by editing, removing, adding, or categorizing the material. This distribution network is rooted in all physical channels established to disseminate international publications in the 70s after the revolution. So basically, this new network is built on top of an older network of the distribution that were used for distributing books. So they're using the same channels, the same ways of going to different people and institutions as well. Offline circulation provides for one type of anonymity, more visibility to people taking part in the underground circulating system, while less surveillance from the government or corporate entities. Presenting monopolies, this highly decentralized and personal form of distribution ensures enormous penetration throughout the country. Its fluid form turns El Paquete into a complex arrangement full of interdependencies of infrastructural, technological, and social elements. These case studies demonstrate that the phenomenon of shadow libraries cannot be reduced only to its copyright infringing aspects. On the contrary, it needs to be contextualized within a more extensive socio-political debate that positions the request for free and unrestricted access to knowledge and participatory methods for archiving. Although their impact is different in the global north and the global south, self-education, shadow libraries, and amateur librarians emerge to counteract spaces of privilege. They become spaces to share not only information, but also strong desire for anonymous, private, and undisturbed communication. Preserving and interlinking knowledges under these conditions assume new importance which rises from social needs and self-organizing networked structures. Shadow libraries are defended as a way to take back the autonomy of knowledge production and rebuild grounds of solidarity. Amateur librarians revise previous library configurations, demanding new readings of its original frameworks, and the collaboration between underground practices and institutions. Under this idea, the shadow library turns into a social space which houses a body of knowledge and experience that's organized by the community that's using it. The opportunity to participate is something institutional libraries, universities, and art institutions could learn from. Users having a say in what is shared and how it's shared. Thank you.